it's James. I'm here with another episode of What's Brewing. So today we've got something a little bit special. I'm going to be working on a brew that is going to be an entry for a competition that you may or may not have seen. It came out last week. The competition is in conjunction with Verdant Brewing Co, the Malt Miller, BrewCon and the Lallemand Yeast Company. So the competition is brew a beer in the style of Verdant Brewing Co and you can win some awesome prizes. I'm going to run you through what my entry is going to be and we're going to start brewing it today. So I'm going to run over some of the details of the competition just in case you don't know, give you an idea about what it is. I've got the blog article that introduced the competition here with me. You will need to submit 3 330ml bottles to Verdant by the 13th of August. The sole requirement for the competition is that it just has to be an IPA in the style of Verdant Brewing Company. If you're not familiar with their beers, they're awesome, juicy, hazy, big, hot beers, and that's what we're going to try and recreate here today. With a little twist, going to do a black IPA. I'll go over why I'm doing a black IPA in a minute, but before I do that I'm just going to go over the prizes that you can win with this competition, which are actually quite generous. 3 places, first, second, third. First place is a year's supply of Lallemand yeast, £100 voucher for the Malt Miller, and a ticket to BrewCon London 2021, and also a tour of the Verdant Brewing Company that's located in Cornwall, so you get a tour of their brewery, see their processes, which sounds awesome, but also you get a load of their beers, that's a given. It's their competition, so they'll chuck a load of that your way. Second place, Lallemand Yeast and Goodies, £75 voucher for the Malt Miller, and a BrewCon ticket for London 2021 again. And finally, third place, Lallemand Goodies, £50 voucher for the Malt Miller and a ticket for BrewCon London. If you didn't hear about this competition, it's probably a little late to enter now. To actually enter, you had to go through the Malt Miller site, put in a code to get a free packet of the yeast. Get a free packet of that, use that in your brew, and that's your entry. Only 100 places were available. So as you can imagine, demand was quite high for the competition and it was quite an ordeal. It was fairly exciting trying to get the yeast. The Malt Miller site went down multiple times. It thought it was under attack from all the people trying to access the site. So it was a bit exciting for an afternoon, but I did luckily manage to get some of the yeast and it only took 60 minutes. So what I'll run through now is some objectives that I've set myself for this competition. These aren't the objectives of the actual competition that Lallemand or Verdant have set. These are just ones that I wanted to impose on myself to make it a bit more of a challenge, because it's quite vague. Just use the yeast, make an IPA. So now I'm going to go over my self-imposed objectives. These are based on what James, the head brewer at Verdant Brewing Company, said in his supporting article that went with the brewing competition announcement. So he gave some advice on how they brew even sharks need water, and there was a few points in there that I've taken out and I've decided to sort of run with and create these objectives. So the first one is to use, it's called terroir. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's French, so excuse me if I'm not. And that basically is a term that defines the individual characteristics of certain. So for example, you might use the same wheat in different beers, but those wheats will have been grown in different places. So naturally there's a small characteristic change between them. And these small characteristics are things that you can pick up perhaps in the beer or wine, whatever it is you're drinking. But I'm going to take that, and how James, the head brewer at Verdant, suggested was the local water obviously differs between where you are. I mentioned last time that here I have really hard water. I'm going to use my water and brew something that works with it. So I'm going to make a black IPA because it's more suited to the high alkalinity of my water. The next one is to dry hop, and dry hop big. which is pretty much a given for an IPA, especially one of the Verdant Brewing Company's beers. They are heavily dry hopped, super hazy, so that's what I'm going to do with mine. So the next one is to do a closed transfer. This is again something James suggested in his article, that with all the hop additions going in late, you need to minimize the amount of oxygen getting in. So a closed transfer will help ensure that as minimal amount of oxygen gets in as possible. Also on the list is to get a big fluffy head. So I've got plenty of malts that are going to improve head retention and hopefully give me a really fluffy head characteristic. And finally, in James's own words, think juicy, hoppy, unfiltered, hazy beers that are always vegan. So they're my objectives. Now let's go through the recipe and I'll talk you through what I'm going to do. So first on the recipe ingredients list is 3 kilos of crisp pale ale malt. That is my base malt. Next on the list is Munich malt. So I've gone for Weyermann Munich II, 1 kilo of that. And also Caramunich Type 3, 500 grams of that. The reason I've gone for Munich malt is because not only do they provide the diastatic power that you need to convert all your starches and such to sugars that the yeast can ferment, but also they bring colour, flavour, complexity, everything that I'm trying to get in this black IPA. So for dark beers like what I'm brewing today, the recommended amount is sort of 15 to 30% maximum Munich malt. I think I'm right at the top end, so about 30% for my Munich malt. Also going to be using Carabohemian malt, similar to the Munich malt in some respect, but again just to bring complexity, colour to the beer. A kilo of that. 500 grams of Carawheat, so again colour, flavour, but also to bring a bit of creaminess and body to the final product. To really bring in that dark colour, almost black that I'm going for, I've got 300 grams of crisp chocolate malt. That one is EBC 950, so fairly dark, not as dark as like roasted barley or something, but just a little bit to bring some colour to the product. And finally, I've got flaked oats. These ones actually include the husk, so probably wouldn't need it for the small amount of wheat that I'm using, but including those husks should give me a little bit of help when it gets to lautering and sparging, and oats just for a bit more body. So that's malts. Next up it's hops. So 300 grams of hops total. I've got Archer, 100 grams of that. Archer's described as floral with delicate hints of lime and peach, so that's going to be quite interesting. Next up, Azacca. Azacca's big in citrus and tropical fruit notes, so that should be a good one for dry hopping. And finally, Moutere. This one, massive alpha acids content, 15%. This is big in citrus and tropical fruit. And finally, the most important ingredient for this brew is the yeast. The Verdant IPA Lallemand yeast. So this yeast was produced in collaboration with Verdant Brewing Company, selected specifically for its ability to work well with really hoppy beers. Some of the notes that they described that the yeast produced are things like tropical, apricot, citrus, so it works really well with hop-forward beers, and it's also a requirement for the competition, so that is the style I'll be using. So that's all the ingredients. The Grainfather's up to temperature. Time to mash him. So the mash temp is set to 65 degrees. Going to do a standard 65 degrees for 60 minutes and then just do a mash out at 75 degrees for 10 minutes. You might notice that I didn't add the chocolate malt to the mash straight away, and that's because I want this to impart just colour more than flavour. I don't want any astringency coming through from this malt, so what I'm going to do is add it now with 20 minutes left on the timer, and hopefully that just imparts colour more than anything to the brew. So adding stuff later to the mash in the Grainfather can be a little bit tricky. What I've done is I've removed the lid and the recirculation pipe and also the overflow. What I'm going to do now is remove the top grain cover. Obviously be careful because this is going to be hot. Just raise that overflow pipe a little bit. Then I'll add my additions. I've not put the grain cover back in place, so I'm trying to be very careful not to pour anything down there. So with the malt addition stirred in, I can now put back on the top grain bed cover. Again, being careful because this is going to be hot. And replace the overflow, put the recirculation pipe back on and put the lid back on, and that's that done. Alright, the mash is done, time to sparge. Okay, so boil temperature's reached, so we can go to the 60-minute hop additions. Minute addition, 5 grams of Irish moss. So the boil's now complete, nothing left to do but transfer it over to the fermentation vessel and pop in the yeast. So it's the next day now. By the time I finished everything last night, the work was quite hot. Didn't manage to cool it as much as I'd hoped, so I just left it overnight to cool. Currently at 18 degrees now, so that's the perfect temp for me to pitch this rehydrated yeast. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Thank you for watching. I'm very new to YouTube, so if there's anything you'd like to see, any recommendations you've got, things you don't like, let me know in the comments and I'll take it on board. And if you could like or subscribe, that would be absolutely amazing. Help me out at the start of my YouTube journey. Nothing left to say other than thank you again. See you soon.